Good morning. Hello, everybody. I hope you are well, and I hope you can hear me. I haven't got my tech all set up there. I think so. There we go. Let's see. Oh, I hear me. That means we're good. We're good to go. Hope you are well this Monday morning. I'm eating my hair. There we go. Welcome. Welcome to another You Be the Behavior Consultant on a Monday morning at 11 a.m. here, Texas time, Central. And I'm going to turn my phone down a little bit here so that is not distracting. We have another really interesting topic. Oh, thank you, Jessica. I'm glad for the feedback so that you can hear me. I love it when technology works. Makes me happy. We're going to talk about social validity today, which may be a new word for some of you, but by the end, it's going to be all familiar to you. And in reality, it's probably something you have dealt with before. We're just going to talk about it in a new way today. So for those of you that are new to the live stream, this is You Be the Behavior Consultant, a live stream I do every Monday at 11 a.m. We've only missed it one time, I think, since the pandemic started, and one time because we did a conference over a Monday. But yeah, it's a very interactive thing. I usually present a topic for discussion. You guys get to communicate with me, share your ideas and experiences, and we look at the topic in detail with video clips and fun stuff like that, and then we recap it, and by the end we're all hopefully a little bit more educated about some topic that's related to animal training. And what's really fun about what we do is I think we go beyond basics, which is really fun for those of us that really like to explore animal training and behavior in sort of a deep dive kind of way. And even if you're new to training, I think it's really fun too, because we like to keep the language relatable, you know? It's no fun when it's so deep that, we're going, I don't even know what you're talking about. So here we go. What are we talking about today? Let me see. We are talking about social validity. And I don't know if this is a word that's familiar to folks or not. But like I said, it's going to be by the end of this live stream. So what do you guys think? Has anyone, I usually post a little... what do you call it? A little announcement on social media before we get started every day. And so it gives you guys a little chance if you want to search around and look up those words and see what they might mean, especially when it comes to behavior. Has anyone had a chance, or even if you just want to think about it, one of the nice things about our interactions here is, there's kind of no wrong answers. It's more about a discussion here. So has anybody had a chance to think about, or maybe even look up what social validity means? What does it mean to have social validity? And what might some of the things be that we would look at in the world of animal training if we were exploring social validity? And maybe some of you have experienced some issues when it comes to social validity in your own animal training, or maybe you're at your facility, or maybe having discussions with your colleagues or your peers or your friends that have created some situations. So Al has a comment: concerns with appropriateness and acceptability of applied behavior analysis interventions as both the process and the outcomes measures. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, those are big concerns when it comes to social validity. Absolutely, definitely. And some of you may relate to that in some examples that you have encountered in your career. And the reason I bring these up is because I can certainly relate to some of this even in some recent discussions that people have been having about procedures, especially. So the process, where Al is talking about the process here. So some of you may have come up with some examples, but this isn't even just new. This is stuff that's been going on for years and years and years when it comes to the animal training community. So maybe some of you can think of some examples. And you know what? I'm going to flip to this slide here because this gives us some more questions that will help you think about some examples if you are having a hard time thinking about how does this relate to what you do as an animal trainer, because as we get into this a little bit more, you're going to go, oh yeah, that's happened to me, or I've been in that situation. And especially if you're somebody that ever does consulting work, whether it's companion animal or zoo professional, or even if you've tried to help somebody just, for fun, just been like, hey, I can help you with that. You might have encountered these kinds of situations. So one of the things that Al brought up is the process and the outcome. So those are two things that we definitely look at when we're considering social validity. And there's something else that we might look at as an element that we might have to ask about social validity. So any other folks feeling confident or feeling comfortable throwing some thoughts in there in the chat, or what we're assessing? It's sometimes hard to visualize. And Adrian made it to our discussion. Yay! I think your rain is heading our way. We're supposed to have a rainy week here. Hasn't been summer yet here in Texas, it feels like. Not our normal summer. It's been raining all the time. So yes, we're going back to our social validity. What is social validity and what elements? Al brought out some comments about what some of the elements might be that we measure. So we might measure the process. We might assess the process. We might assess the outcomes. And Shelly, hey, you're just able to find this. I know we're migrating to YouTube because of Facebook giving us such a hard time. Looking at the appropriateness of the behavior. Yes, so that's another one. So there you go. We've got the three things that we might assess for social validity. We might look at the behavior. Do we consider the behavior that we're going to train, or in some cases it might be an intervention? So we might be solving a behavior problem. So is our target behavior, is our behavior goal something that we would consider socially valid? Is the process or the procedure that we're going to use something that we would consider socially valid? And what's going to happen once we train that behavior or do that intervention? What's the result? What's the outcome? Would we consider that socially valid? Yeah, there you go. So very, very good. So can you guys think of any situations that those things have come into question, or maybe some, even over the years? It doesn't even have to be for you personally. Great question, Jessica. Socially valid for the animal or the trainer? Excellent question. What do you guys think about that? What do you think about that question? Who does it matter to? What do you think? Who does it matter to? And Michelle's adding to that comment too. Socially valid for who? Absolutely fantastic question. Excellent question. So who does it matter to? Who is social validity important to? Great question. Great question. What do you guys think? Who should we be asking? Yeah, both. Jessica says both. Absolutely right. So one of the things that we do when we're looking at social validity, good question, can relate to when we train animals for public demos. Yes, there you guys go. Absolutely. So one of the things that we want to be thinking about, it matters for both, says Chris. I agree with you. Yeah. So when we're talking about social validity, one of the things we need to think about is who are, quote, the stakeholders. And so your stakeholders can be, the people that take care of those animals. It can be the general public that are watching your training demos. It can be the animal itself. Complex questions, subjective, and may not be aligned. Possibly, I think about this with dogs, the dog owner, the community. You're right, Michelle. So all those people are stakeholders potentially in your situation. So when you're asking the question of, is this behavior, for example, let's just take the behavior, is this behavior socially valid? You would want to consider all the stakeholders in this situation. And you may be asking that question to all the people that you would consider stakeholders. So if it was, like say a zoological facility, who is going to be held accountable for this behavior that you're being trained? Is it the director of the zoo? Is it the supervisor? Is it the keeper that's training the behavior? Other trainers? Yep, Al is saying other trainers. Is it the veterinarian that's gonna, have some decision making in this process? So everybody that you think is a stakeholder in whether you choose to train this behavior or not, maybe somebody that needs to have some input on the decision-making process. So all your stakeholders really might matter in making a decision on some of these things here, right? Yeah, great questions, you guys. Right, and so I liked, so somebody, so it was Christina who said, good question, can relate to when we train animals for public demos. So that's a really great question. So that kind of brings us back to some of those situations about, have you been in situations when you have conflict with the social validity of the behavior? So some of you may have been in that situation where a behavior that has been discussed for a public demonstration, may or may not be socially valid for a public demonstration, or it may be valid in some settings but not in other settings, right? So I think these are some really important questions, or culturally it may be acceptable in one culture and not another culture, and so this is where it gets really complex. And some of you may have been in those situations. And this is just looking at a behavior, right? Just a behavior. And I may go ahead and give you a video example to help you think about that. So this was from some consulting work I was doing in Indonesia, and we'll look at this behavior with this elephant, and you're going to see it very much out of context. And so you're not going to see, and I can tell you about the storyline afterwards, but we'll just look at the behavior and, think about the fact that the behavior is being seen in Indonesia versus being, maybe something that, you probably wouldn't see in the US.
Saat ini berusia 29 tahun. Just relax. Welcome teman-teman Indonesia. Now, be a prisoner. Thank you. Thank you for your participation. Have a seat, please. Kita teman-teman Indonesia sampai kali ini biasa kita berikan pada orang yang sangat spesial. Salah satunya ada orang yang sudah menyumbangkan dana konservasi melalui hasil karya lukisan Gena.
So, I was there consulting, and they were letting me watch the show to show me what they do. And in that moment, I was an honored guest, having the opportunity to be chosen from the audience for the elephant to put the wreath around my neck and to get a kiss from the elephant. So that was considered a very special opportunity, but you would probably not see that behavior in the United States, right? Because of the social validity aspect of it. Right. So, Chris says, training my companion cockatoos for free flight is frowned upon in some circles. Right, you're right. Yet, if you were to let's think about the social validity of the outcome. I think that's a really great example. What do you think about the social validity of the outcome when you think about the social validity of the outcome for your cockatoos doing that behavior as a stakeholder, as the caregiver for those animals? You would probably have some thoughts about the outcome of free flight for your companion cockatoos and training them to do that behavior, and how it impacts their lives and why you train for free flight, I would imagine. And I can tell you more about why that team trains those elephants, because we're going to look at another video from there in a bit that'll explain more about why, about the behaviors that they do in that show. So Chris says, I think they're expressing themselves as birds. Others see raptors, death, or loss only. Al says catching game. So you see, and I think you're talking about your birds of prey, I'm assuming, Al, and the opportunity to do, and I think that kind of ties in with what Chris is saying, maybe opportunities to do more natural behavior that they're, and I think if I were to sort of maybe give a broad word for that, it might be maybe improved animal welfare. Maybe it might be sort of a broad catch-all word that we might be able to use to add, I don't know, describe why those behavior, the outcome of doing those behaviors. So free flight for you might be improved animal welfare, and maybe for Al, having the birds go out and be able to hunt is improved animal welfare compared to staying in the mews all day. And Shelley says, Chris Shank, that what you do is amazing and gives them the best possible life in a domestic situation. Yeah, and again, it kind of, the words for me that come to mind is improved animal welfare. Yeah, and Chris says, I agree, animal welfare. Yeah, I like all these things you guys are adding to the discussion. They're really nice. So maybe I'll go to this here. So social validity, it is a construct, right? I mean, here we are. We're kind of breaking it down a little bit, but it is a construct, but it causes us to ask these questions. So are we focusing on the right thing? Are we focusing on the right behavior? And you'll notice here, I purposely picked these different photos here because they're kind of all like different animals sort of doing what we might consider like agility or, jumping or going over things, but they're all very different species under very different conditions, and people may have the stakeholders may have very different perspectives on it, and different individuals may have a different perspective on it, kind of like what you were saying, Chris, about, flying your cockatoos. Different communities have different thoughts on it, but to the stakeholders, this is their perspective on it. Are we doing the right thing? Are we focusing on the right thing? Focus to your audience, right? And is what we are doing or recommending okay with your client? And that's about the process. Is this type or amount of change sufficient? And that's talking about the outcome. And is your client satisfied with the effects? So for a behavior analyst, so this is, going back to behavior science, that means they are expected to clearly define and describe the goals, and to what extent possible, conduct a risk-benefit analysis of the procedures, which we've talked about a lot with this group, and of the procedures selected, I can't talk, to achieve the objectives. So, and again, that's making sure we are defining what our outcomes are. What do we hope to achieve with our objectives? And then to kind of break it down a little bit further, so these are, again, kind of asking those questions again. Is the behavior goal or behavior problem intervention socially significant? Who will it benefit and how? And so you guys asked that question, which I thought was great. Were the procedures used to train the behavior or solve the problem socially acceptable in the eyes of the client? What procedures will you use? How will you decide, and who decides? Okay, going again back to our stakeholders. And then again, when we talk about that, what procedures we're going to use, this is when we go back to our risk-benefit analysis that we've talked about before. And did training the behavior or solving the problem using that procedure that you've decided upon produce socially important outcomes or results? Did you see an improvement in animal welfare as a result of your training? And then, of course, how do you know that it improved animal welfare? And again, some of these may not necessarily be as, and I chose animal welfare, but again, sometimes our objective isn't always animal welfare. So I want to clarify that, because sometimes our objective is raising conservation awareness. And I chose animal welfare as my outcome when I wrote this, but sometimes that isn't always necessarily the outcome. Animal welfare may be a part of it, but sometimes our outcome is conservation education. So it's up to your stakeholder, right? So so getting back to and I think that kind of ties back to my my elephant example, and I may go back to showing you more on that elephant before we go into this example with the tiger here, which some of you have seen before. Then this is from Copenhagen Zoo, and I don't think Annette is on here, is she? Oh, I don't know. But we'll go back to the tiger in a minute here. But going back to our elephant, so I'm going to show you another video from that program in Indonesia. So it's really interesting when you look at the elephant thing, because, even though we don't really in a lot of, Western culture do a whole lot of what you're going to see in this video with elephants. We might do different kind of educational presentations with elephants where it's more like they're in their habitat and they're maybe doing more natural behaviors. This kind of presentation, in Indonesia was a little bit more like what I think of when I see a bird show, to be quite honest, where the elephants, kind of came from behind stage and they came and they did behaviors, but it also actually told a conservation education story. And so the whole thing was about the conflict between man and elephants, and how can we get elephant and man to live together because it's important to conserve elephants. That was really the whole message of the story. And the fact that in, this Asian culture, elephants, live in the wild there, and they come into conflict with people. And so that's not something, most of us are accustomed to in our worlds. So, that's another thing that we're just, in other cultures, we may not be accustomed to. So, it may not make sense for somebody in the United States because we just don't understand that, and so there might be a way, I don't know. And again, as a consultant, you walk into something like this and, your goal, your objective is to be there and help people with their animal training. I'm not going to change how, whether they have an elephant show or not. That's not what I'm there for. I'm there to, help them address behavior goals and challenges and teach them ways to train behaviors using, methods that are least restrictive, or I should say optimal, as from our last live stream, and efficient and effective and optimal. And so that's what my focus is. And so what was going on with this elephant, and we talked about this in a live stream a long time ago, but we'll talk about it again. The objective was this particular elephant, had made the discrimination between when it was a show and when it was a training session. And what they wanted her to do was spray water at the audience. And she was doing it kind of like very wimpy spray when it was an actual show setting, but she would do it great when it was a training session. So she'd made the discrimination. And so we tried to set up a situation that was almost exactly like the show, because they would bring her out on her own to do it, to practice it, and she would do the wimpy spray. And so in the show setting, all the other elephants come out with her. So we recreated it with all the other elephants coming out with her. And the scene in the show is that the elephants are out in the forest foraging. And so in the show, they would normally have a bunch of branches set up, and the other elephants would come out and forage on these other branches, and she would go to this little spot where there's water and spray the audience. And so that's what you're going to see here, is that she's going to come out, she's going to spray some water. You'll see the before, where she kind of does it a little wimpy, and then she goes backstage, and then and you are going to see that, one of the keepers has an anchus. And so one of the things that I was really trying to focus on is, how can we make this a more positive reinforcement based program, and they do use positive reinforcement, but I really wanted to ramp up the positive reinforcement part of it. And so what we did is she would come out. If she sprayed nice and high, we gave her food for spraying, and then we also gave her like 10 apples in the back and kind of got away from them, using any aversives. And what ended up happening is then we would phase out the banana being thrown when she sprayed on stage, and then gave her all the great food in the back. And what we'll see is that the other elephants start to fall apart in their behavior, but that wasn't our focus. Our focus was her, and she ended up getting on track by us doing that. So, but like I said, this is where we go. The whole point of this really was all about the social validity of elephants being in shows. And again, in this culture, for these people, that I was consulting with, it was okay for them. And again, it was a conservation message. Really what the focus was on the procedure. Can we get, the procedure as positive reinforcement based as possible? So anyway, so I'll let you watch the process. It's kind of, it's edited, but you'll see kind of a before, a one session or one practice, and then 2 more from our training session, basically. Is she going to get reinforced back there? Okay. I want to go see what's happening back there. What happens back there?
Yeah.
Does she get something?
Stay here. Give food. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
Same this. Yeah.
Come here, inside.
Okay. Let them call her. Let them call her. Heavily reinforced. Okay. Uh-oh. Make a collar. Collar in the back. So commenting on a couple things there, and So Al said, were they lowering the criteria and accepting poor behavior in shows, creating their problem? I do think, and those of you on here who have ever done shows, I think, like me, I think they had fallen into that trap, which can happen in scripted shows where, you feel that pressure to, we're in the show and we got to move on to the next part. And instead of addressing the problem as it's happening, yes, the undesired responses get reinforced because people are trying to stick to the script and move on forward, and the undesired response gets reinforced. And next thing you know, the animal learns, I don't need to do the correct thing. And they also have the challenge of, they've got four elephants out on stage at the same time, and they're trying to manage all that behavior at the same time. And they have an interesting dynamic of how, elephant behavior is managed, and they've got their mahouts who are acting, and it was challenging. I think they what we did was helpful. So there was that. Yeah. So yes, that did happen. But we were able just in that one session to get the animal back up to spraying nice good sprays, and really we were able to fade out reinforcing on stage, and that she learned, okay, I'm going to get a big pile of apples in the back for giving big sprays out front on stage. So we were able to address that pretty quickly. The other thing that I wanted to address was Chris's comment up there, that the animal welfare question, what if the client approves of a shock collar to accomplish the goal behavior? Is that socially valid? So that's going to come down to our procedures. So hang on to that question. That's a really, really important question. And we're going to talk about how do we do that. So one of the things that we also need to think about, it's great to ask these questions, but we have to have a process, right? What's our process for creating social validity? And that's, we have this construct, right? Social validity. And now we've asked our questions, we've got our 3 questions, but what's our process, right? So we've got to have a process. So that's really important. So our first thing might be, how are we going to address our behavior goals? And so we should have a process for choosing behavior goals. And so you might need to gather your stakeholders. You might want to brainstorm your possible goals if you're, trying to train new behaviors. And you want to have a clear description of your target behavior goals and what the criteria is going to be. And this is where we have, maybe our broad social goal of, for example, improved animal welfare or conservation messaging, whatever your target goal is. And so those of you that are in animaltrainingfundamentals.com, I do have that course on identifying behavior goals and documentation, and so I've kind of made some categories for you. And so I have that chart in there that you can download, and so I've created a bunch of behavior goals that you may want to use. You don't have to use those. And then there is a system in there for you to determine, your prioritization. So you've got a way to say, okay, well, this is more important to me than that one. And then if another thing you can do is you can make a rating system, with a Likert type scale where, 0 to 10, this behavior is more important to me than that behavior. And your stakeholders can rate them and say, well, this one's, a 10 for me. This one's a 1 for me. Now, in some cases with animal training, as you guys know, we have to train some behaviors before we can train others, because we need that behavior to help us train the other behavior. We don't get to go to, well, I'm just going to go train a blood draw now, but the animal doesn't know how to target or lay down or hold position for duration. You don't get to go from 0 to a 100. And of course, all this is also based on the skill level of the people that are going to be implementing this. You also don't get to just jump to the head of the line without having, created those competency levels yet too. And then you can take everybody's responses and put those all together and kind of say, okay, here's our priority list for this individual animal based on the skills of our people that are going to be applying this, and the learning history of this particular animal, and our needs for this animal in order to address its welfare, or our needs in terms of addressing conservation goals, or maybe it's about addressing, behavior problems that we've identified as priorities. And so those are all on that chart as well. So we've got that, right? We've got those things to consider. And speaking of behavior goals and problems and priorities, I have a fun one that we can look at. And again, this is where it's up to the stakeholder to decide. So I'm going to share this little video. I found this in my files, and you guys can decide whether you think I thought this was a behavior problem or not. And it might be for some people, it might not be for others, but this is a fun one. So now for some people, we've seen a cursing parrot get all sorts of attention on the internet, right? And so, they thought that was really fun. I remember this, yeah. And then, for others, we've seen that that's really a problem because they worry about, well, I don't know, if I were not around anymore, would anybody adopt my parrot because it says bad words, right? So now he doesn't really say it anymore. I think I just haven't reinforced it, and or maybe I'm cursing less. I don't know. but it's that one's gone away. So for me, it's I guess it was one that I decided probably I shouldn't reinforce. It was funny at the time, but I didn't reinforce it. Now another one that with our changing conditions in the world, one that we, you may recall, Annetta and I thought was really important to address was testing animals for COVID. And so when things were pretty intense, we collaborated on a course on training animals for testing for COVID-19. And so her team there at Copenhagen Zoo did an amazing job training a bunch of animals to test for COVID-19. And so some of you may have seen this video, which I will share with you now, that thanks to the staff there at Copenhagen Zoo of training a tiger to allow swabbing for COVID-19 testing. And then Shelley says, ideally, it's not what you want, and I would try to reinforce the singing and ignore the cursing and hope eventually it goes into extinction. And then don't laugh because sometimes it's really hard. Trust me, it was very hard. Yeah, he doesn't really do it anymore. All right, let's take a look at some COVID-19 testing with a tiger at Copenhagen Zoo. And thanks to Zako, actually. And what was amazing is, Zaco trained that during, some times that were really challenging for zoos when, staffing was short and, we were still going through really tough times. I don't know, Annetta, how things are in Denmark now. I mean, we seem to be a little bit, better here in the United States in terms of, the rates are going down and everything like that. Yeah, so, and right now, I mean, we're optimistic. I mean, hope, yeah, it was nice, wasn't it, Al? So he got that done really quickly. I would say, in my opinion, in a really quick time so that we could put that course together and put it out there for people so that people could take advantage of that, because at the time we felt that was really socially valid because better staff wise, but still a lot of testing, etc. Okay. In Denmark right now. But we felt it was really, really important that people, maybe have some examples, some guidance on ways to test animals. And because you can also test with an oral swab too. And so there's some of those examples in the course too. Train animals as quickly as possible because, there were still a lot of unknowns. And Chris says, impressive. COVID testing is uncomfortable. At least it was for me, like the head collar. Okay. Oh, you like the head collar. Yeah. Well, so actually that was just, some plastic that was, and I can put the video up there again, maybe without the audio. It really was just like a target. I'll put that here. Yeah. So that plastic really just was a target, like a place to target the head. So it doesn't, obviously the animal can move out of that at any time. Or like a station, and so it just helps give the animal information where to be, so to speak. Yeah. And and so Annetta and I felt it was sort of socially valid, so to speak, a socially valid behavior, especially at the time. That's when to keep the head fixed. Yes, she says. Yeah, and so at the time we felt the more because at that time there were more cases coming up of certain species of animals testing positive or showing symptoms and testing positive. And so we thought it might become more necessary for there to be a way for people to test animals, especially for cats, to test animals in a way that was voluntary and didn't require sedation for COVID-19. And, it was still very uncertain times with, I think that hadn't been rolled out yet, for humans. There weren't vaccinations for humans yet. So that was a pretty socially valid behavior, we felt. So it was pretty important. And so things may change, right? Things may change as hopefully we're able to make more progress in making it less and less likely that people will be faced with COVID-19 and the potential to pass it on to animals. So hopefully this behavior, may not be necessary. Maybe it won't be as socially valid, and maybe it won't be a priority for people to train this behavior. And I know there's other ways to test for it that have been tested. Like I know there was a study that came out about using fecal tests, but I don't know all the stories out there about how it compares, and if it's I don't know if anyone's even done a test to compare how it compares to doing swabs and all that. So anyway, stuff to think about. All right, so let's get into the discussion about the procedures, because I think, this is really significant stuff. So procedures, social validity of procedures. Holy cow. Now this is some meaty stuff in my opinion. Evaluating procedures for their social acceptability. this is the stuff that really blows my mind sometimes. So what are some things that, the reason I put this photo here is, come on, for 13 years that television show was on as being like the best way to train your dog. From a public perspective, that was really socially valid, wasn't it? And, from the perspective of professional animal trainers, I mean, I remember being on a plane watching that show and watching a dog that was literally lifted off the ground and out of breath and like passed out and laying on its side, right? And a lot of animal trainers were up in arms about that, which I think, was good. It was great. And it's amazing. Like, here we are again where, so that was, I can't remember when that all came out and went around. And I appreciate that people are really, really, sensitive to that and don't want animals to be hurt. And then, it's interesting now, like, with the information coming out about the constructional approach and Kelly Snyder's thesis. I looked back, her thesis about the constructional approach came out in 2007. So here we are with, this really nice non-coercive thing that can help these animals that are showing aggressive responses. And it's taken 14 years. And like literally just like this past week or so, suddenly there's been this explosion of people being receptive to it. I don't know if you've noticed this. It was like at ABMA, people were like, there were a lot of people who were like kind of going, oh, maybe, yeah. But there were a few holdouts who were very like, no. And then like right after that, my understanding is that at IABC conference, there was a more open and receptive attitude towards it. And then right after that, there was like all these podcasts in which people were like, yay, yay, constructional approach. So it's like all of a sudden now taking a turn where people are seeing that, this particular procedure is now getting social validity. It's like really interesting. So it's very interesting how these things can change. It's so bizarre. And, the TV show in which dogs were being hanged was being praised for years. And then this non-coercive technique was being poo-pooed for, 14 years. And now suddenly it's okay. And Michelle says he's horrible and has significantly impacted the public's perception of social validity and acceptability and has negatively impacted dog welfare. Yeah, this is the crazy thing about social validity, that it's really just these, it's not really truly evaluating stuff. This is really just about public opinion and the way that public opinion can sway the use of procedures, whether they really truly are good or not, and I think that's kind of the point that I was making is that, a really, really coercive procedure was being held up as good and a really non-coercive procedure was being held down as bad for 14 years by the professional community, by the way. And Michelle says cat is still under attack in many positive dog training circles, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't know. I was just saying that it seemed like recently it's taken a turn, like within the last few weeks, that there's suddenly been support for it. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's what I was observing based on I literally saw 3 podcasts come out by different really kind of prominent people supporting it. I've seen some posts about it being supported at the IAABC conference. So, maybe it's taking a turn. That was the impression I got. So anyway, so it's just very bizarre. It's really bizarre. So what we need to do is we need to evaluate procedures for their social acceptability. So this is different. Social acceptability. This is a different word than social validity. Social acceptability, right? So this is that sort of a public opinion, which is a really tough one because, again, public opinion isn't always right. And even professional opinion isn't always right. So this is where we're going to get into some of the things that, you know, I prefer to use, which is the risk benefit analysis. So we want to evaluate the procedure for both the immediacy of treatment, effects, and potential for aversive effects. So this is where the risk benefit analysis is your real friend. And you know that that, you know, I have some good resources for you on that. And this is where we really truly measure, are we maximizing benefits and minimizing harms? And that's a more objective evaluation instead of this, you know, well, I like the guy or I don't like the guy, you know, and or this is my guru who said it, you know, get away from religion and, you know, training religion and training philosophy. This is where we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of, is this a good procedure or not a good procedure? Okay. Sorry, my contact lenses are fuzzy and my words are small on the screen. Evaluate procedures for treatment precedents in consideration of treatment effectiveness and topography of the behavior. So basically, is there evidence of their effectiveness? But of course, you know, this goes back to our risk benefit analysis, because just because it works doesn't necessarily mean it's always, you know, an optimal procedure. Evaluate potential participant preference for treatments that are not considered least restrictive. So you know, that's another thing you have to consider, is that your participant may not be open to what you recommend, but may be open to something else. So, you know, and they may not be able to do it too. That's the other thing too. So you have to think about like how skilled is the person you're, you know, working with. Like if if you're working with the general public and you're asking them to apply something that they may not have the skills to apply, you may have to give them something easier that they can do that will still give them results as well. So, and remember, social acceptability is likely to influence the treatment integrity and treatment fidelity. So treatment integrity is how well they isolate the what we call the independent variable. So that means, are they actually, you know, like, are there other things that are affecting how well it's being applied? Like, so you know, there might be other factors that are like let's say that we know that, you know, the bad behavior is being reinforced, and so you've stopped reinforcing it, but somebody else is reinforcing it now. So now, you know, your treatment integrity is messed up, right? So that's one of the things that could be messed up. And then treatment fidelity is making sure that you're following the procedure as planned. So is everybody doing it the way that they're supposed to be doing it? And so if the person doesn't really, you know, have social acceptability, if they kind of like, well, I don't really, you know, like what this person says, it's not in line with, you know, my social acceptability of this all, then they're probably not going to follow what you've prescribed as the procedures. So that's got to be something to consider as well. And social acceptability of actual procedures should be, sorry, my contact lenses are so dirty, should be assessed again after the intervention to determine if procedures were practical, cost-effective, and had habilitative validity. So basically, you know, did they do what you wanted there? Did they make an impact? Defined as consumer satisfaction in terms of maximizing overall benefit to treatment, while minimizing the overall cost of treatment. So basically saying, you know, go back and check. You know, you should assess this over and over again. Was it doing what you asked? Oh yeah. And Anetta says it may be a bit late to bring this up, not being a procedure, but what about training for animals for euthanasia? Is it socially valid? Yeah. And again, I think that comes back to asking your stakeholders, do they think it's socially valid? Me personally, I think it's socially valid because I think it's improving animal welfare in those last moments. So yeah, I think that's a great question. So now going back to this social validity of procedures, this goes back to that risk-benefit analysis that we talk about all the time. You know, so you know, I use that Likert scale where I ask my stakeholders, and this is just a little snippet of that, but I take all these categories and I ask, you know, the risk of doing the procedure or not doing the procedure. And then you can also break it down to each individual procedure, what's the risks and benefits of that procedure, which we did with that redirect, that IRID. I don't know if you remember that in the other live stream, where there's another example of how you can do that with an actual individual procedure. So there's a lot of ways to do risk benefit analysis, but this is just one example that I've already got ready made for you if you want to try that out for our members there. So let me see if that brings me back to another example I wanted to share with you. Or did I miss anything on that? Maybe not. Okay. But does that make sense? You know, how it can be really challenging on these procedural things because we change there too. And Chris is agreeing that training for euthanasia is socially valid for her. But you can see how it varies depending on all these things. Like somebody asked me, like, who decides in the zoo community what behaviors are socially valid, what procedures are socially valid, and what are the outcomes? And I said, well, it changes. I mean, we do have, these overriding organizations that have some decision-making process, but, it depends on, what part of the world you are in, maybe the individual behavior, the individual facility, the individual animal, like, what behavior we might train with one animal, we're not going to train with another. Like I was using an example that, we may train a chimp for a voluntary blood draw, but we're not going to train an armadillo for a voluntary blood draw. It doesn't make sense, right? That wouldn't be socially valid for an armadillo like it would be for a chimpanzee, the same behavior. And same thing, like we were saying about but we might train an armadillo to go into an induction box, and once he's sedated slightly, then we could do the blood draw. You know what I'm saying? You see how that it changes depending on the situation. So there you go on that. All right. I think I've shown you the videos I want to show you. So we might be at the recap. So social validity, a construct that asks, I wrote that funny, that asks to question. Okay. A construct that asks to question. Are we focusing on the right thing? Is the behavior goal or behavior problem intervention socially significant? Who will it benefit and how? Is what we are doing or recommending okay with your client? Were the procedures used to train the behavior or solve the problem socially acceptable in the eyes of the client? What procedures will be used? How do you decide? Who decides? Is the type or amount of change sufficient? Is your client satisfied with the effects? Did training the behavior or solving the problem using the identified procedure produce socially important outcomes or results? Did you see an improvement in animal welfare or whatever your outcome is that you want as a result of your training? And how do you know? So that's a whole nother ball of wax. That requires some measuring, which we didn't get into. You should have a process for choosing and prioritizing your behavior goals, your interventions that include your stakeholders. You should also have a process for doing a risk-benefit analysis with your stakeholders for your procedures used to implement your training goals or intervention. This will make it more likely you will get compliance with your implementation and therefore success. That's all your treatment fidelity and treatment integrity. Once your goal is achieved, be sure to evaluate your outcome to make sure you have accomplished the desired result. And you're going to adapt as needed as conditions change. Remember, like I said, the zoos we had in the 1950s are not the same zoos that we have now. So those goals are going to need to be reevaluated and changed, which is fine because things change. Just like I was saying with our training for COVID testing, we may not need to do that in a few, maybe even just a year. I don't know. So, we may find that behavior is not so much of a priority down the road. Hopefully, that would be great. So there you go. So, speaking of that training for intranasal and oral swabs, you still can take that course if you're interested in that. And it is a free course. And I know that's kind of a long URL, but you just go to animaltrainingfundamentals.com it's live events and then nasal swabs, and you can still take that course if you want to, and see all the different things that we trained, and how it all started and why. And if you are a member, you can take that course too. It's still there for you as a member. And the other courses that I talked about that you might be interested in, there is one on identifying behavior goals and documentation, and how you prioritize the risk-benefit analysis, and then also I talked about the constructional approach a little bit, and so I have lots of courses on that. My favorite one is this one right here, and those are all available to members of animaltrainingfundamentals.com. And if you're not a member, we're still doing the 25% off, just using the code sunglasses, and you can take all those courses and so many more, and you get access to all of our live streams. They're all there with jump links, so you can go to your favorite parts. And there it is. How'd we do on time? It looks like it's an hour, so we did all right. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that topic, gave you some more food for thought, and think about your choices of your behaviors that you train and how they change and how they're impacted by social validity, and also your procedures, how they're impacted by social validity, and also your outcomes, how they're impacted by social validity. So you probably never thought about it before, but they all are, right? So there you go. All of us getting deep again when it comes to behavior and behavior science and animal training. So I hope you enjoyed that topic, and we'll see what we come up with for next week. You guys are great. Thank you for participating as always, which I do appreciate. And for those of you who were there for the Tower Talk, my dog is doing good. It turns out he doesn't have the big C, so life is better. Great. And great discussion. Thanks. Perfect. Thank you for another great Monday. Thank you. Good topic. Oh, I'm late. We'll check the live later. Check the replay. And thank you from my friends in all these different countries around the world. It's pretty cool. You guys make it happen. Yay and yay. Yes. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, I'm super happy that looks like my dog's going to be okay, but we're still going to go to the neurologist to find out what the heck it was. But we went to the cancer specialist, and now we have an appointment with the neurologist. And of course, it all happened over Memorial Day weekend when you can't get access to somebody. But he's all good now. So, yay. All right, guys. Well, thank you again. I'm going to go do some more schoolwork and make some phone calls and all this other stuff. So again, I appreciate you all very much. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll look forward to talking to you next week. Take care.